issues to cover today, from the effect of the forced separation on those children and its lingering effects. Border issues, illegal immigration and humane enforcement, and politics and the public. What fallout will there be from the events of this week? So here to give us answers to all these questions, plus many more, is the former immigration attorney to First Lady Melania Trump, Michael Wilds, medical expert for Physicians for Human Rights, Dr. Gail Saltz, and Republican strategist and political commentator, John Burnett. I'd like to welcome you all to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so first, I do want to start with, of course, these children that have been separated. Now, we have an executive order that's going to stop the forced separations at the border, but what do we know of what becomes of the children, the 22,400 children who've already been separated?
At this point, it really appears that there is no public plan, that the children are waiting for their parents either to get a phone call that they've been deported or that they're being processed. And that's really what's disheartening about this. As the mayor just said, 239 of those children are in the New York City region, and there could be resource that could be brought. They haven't spoken to their families. There may be allergies and medications and nuances, and there's certainly an emotionalism that's ascribed to these children that is lost. And what about religious faith and observance and the continuity of their own culture? It seems that the doors to America, which historically have been hinged open, are right now slamming shut. And that is a very bad posture for our nation to take, no matter what side of the aisle you're on.
Okay, and before I get to you, Doctor, though, I do want to get to John, simply with the issue of immigration being slammed shut. I've heard a lot of Republicans say, no, that's not the case. This is about illegal border crossing.
Before I was a Republican, I was a person that really cherished the benefits of having a family. If I didn't have a strong family, I probably would have gone down the wrong path. So having a strong family is extremely important. And that's a Republican value. And I'm glad that the president stepped forward and signed the executive order to try to make sure that going forward and looking back in terms of those 22,000 plus individuals, that they're rejoining with their family somehow. And we need to make sure that there's a comprehensive plan to do so. But this is about illegal immigration, right? We saw the same elements under President Obama, when enormous number of people were crossing the border from various Central American countries. And the thing is, if catch and release is bad, the current situation is bad, it really wasn't President Obama's fault, and it's not President Trump's fault. It's Congress. Congress has not fixed and come up with a comprehensive immigration reform that addresses the loopholes. Even whether you're talking about historical, even right now, detaining children in a detention center beyond 20 days is against the law. So we need to immediately fix a lot of these elements to try to make sure that we can uphold our values while at the same time protect the border. We're talking about illegal immigration. We're talking about, making sure we keep families intact. But what we haven't talked about is securing the border.
With that in mind, I mean, yes, Congress does need to act, and I think we can all agree on that, but government bureaucracy is notoriously slow. We still have these kids in crisis. Doctor, I want to get your take on what the situation might be for them right now.
Horrendous. Really, even beyond securing the borders, I think everyone would agree as a country, we don't want to commit human rights abuses. And this is truly a human rights abuse because we know from prior data that children who are separated from their parents, particularly in traumatic situations, which this already is, they're crossing a border, they're running away from a life-threatening situation, that those children who are separated suffer depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, ongoing trauma into adulthood that actually, if you look back at past studies done, is worse than the trauma they would suffer if they stayed in the traumatic situation. So parents basically provide the feeling of safety, security. They're the primary attachment. When you disrupt that, you change brain function, brain chemistry. These kids suffer cognitive decline. They suffer ongoing emotional decline that ends in mental illness. And for these 22,000 children who are not having a plan to reunite, the longer that they stay separate, the more severe those things will be. And so taking time to figure out how we're going to do things every day is a problem for not just now for those children who are totally distraught, but for the future of those children. And I think to be a country that would knowingly, because the data is firmly out there, exert that kind of abuse for the future of a child is very disturbing for us to be known in the world that way.
Okay.
But we're not addressing illegal immigration. We're not addressing border security.
Well, it seems like there's two different issues at play here.
Absolutely.
These psychological needs of these kids, and of course, yes, and of course the issue of how properly to cross the border.
I think that the illegal immigration is being used now as a wedge issue for the president to draw out his electorate in the midterm elections. We've had a broken immigration system for a long time. And yes, we know President Obama was known as the deporter-in-chief and deported more people than any president prior to his administration. The question is, what is the soul of the United States? Are we going to use the word illegal immigrants? Are we going to constantly, I go on other networks and there's pictures of aliens getting up on walls and climbing over as they're talking. The dialogue has deteriorated to such a point. We talk about anchor babies. I've never met a client who came to America so 21 years later they can be sponsored by the child. We talk about chain migration. I never met somebody who thought that the beautiful sense of propriety of family reunification was anything less than beautiful. You work hard, whether you're picking blueberries in Georgia or fixing beds or you're working on Wall Street, and then you bring your parents, you bring your brother, you bring immediate relatives. That's a beautiful thing. What they're doing is they're changing the narrative. And that is a shame, because we did do this hundreds of years ago. We fought ISIS, we fought pirates. We didn't lose the national character of those founding documents and our founding fathers, what they wanted for this country. And what do we do now? We have scores of foreign students all embedded in this beautiful city who can't be onboarded into the workforce on their F1 student visas, and then we compete against them in another generation on another country. So we should be not only investing in local foreign talent, we should be looking to embrace people who are coming to our shores pleading mercy. Now, yes, we have a border, and our homeland is important. But what's more important is that we don't lose face so that our children are watching the way we respond to this challenge.
Okay, well, speaking of what children are watching and what they're hearing, I do want to read a quote from congressional candidate Michael Grimm out on Staten Island. He said, "I can take you to any nursery, and you're going to hear the exact same things as a mother has to leave for work. Those children haven't been safe in a long time, and the conditions that they have are much better from where they came from." Now, some people might hear that and say that's callous. Some people might hear that and say that's a good point. Kids, anytime that they have to be separated from their parents, freak out, especially if they're young children.
Kids who have separation anxiety will be sad when their parent leaves, but we're not talking about a kid who is being left at daycare and cared for and told the parent telling the child, these people are my surrogate while I'm gone. P.S. I'll be back at the end of the day, and that the child sees every time the parent is back at the end of the day. This is a parent being taken away from child with no information, no hope of return. If you've ever been a person who's had terrible separation anxiety as a child, imagine that's interminable forever in an already traumatic situation that is life-threatening, with a parent clearly being distraught at being removed from their child. So
but
no
is that
information.
A fair point to make? A lot of these are people who have left El Salvador and Guatemala, et cetera. So they've traveled a long way through some very treacherous territory.
In other words, it's already traumatic. So I'm not saying, hey, if you kept the parent with the child, all would be good. It's already a traumatic situation. And in fact, being made more traumatic to some degree by this administration that's now decided that being in a domestic violence situation is not a reason for asylum. Being threatened by gang violence and having your life threatened is no longer a reason for asylum. So, yes, these are families that are already undergoing terrible trauma, but separating them from their parent is the one thing that is keeping some measure of intactness for these children.
John, I'd like to hear from you.
I agree with the separation anxiety, but let's really put things in context here. When we had the lowest unemployment in history for blacks, Hispanics, and I think women for the past 50 years or so, right? So the economy is doing better. That's going to cause even more people trying to make it to the border for economic opportunities. So again, it's illegal immigration, the family separation, which I think we're on the track to try to mend that together to make sure it doesn't happen again in the future.
Well, we're definitely stopping it, but it's not clear how we fix it for the kids.
Right, but the point is that it's stopped, and then we actually try to figure out how to rejoin these families. But we still have to secure the border. And going back to Michael's point earlier, I think both sides are using illegal immigration as a wedge point to try to get political power. Why? Because the Democrats wanted 700 or 800,000 in terms of DACA recipients. The president put 2 million on the table and several other things that exceeded what the Democrats asked for. And all he wanted is to also secure the border. So both sides are actually using people's lives and now security as a political
Well, yes.
I don't think it's partisan. I think Mr. Grimm, who I think is extraordinarily tone deaf. He's a federal felon or a criminal who just came out of jail running for Congress all over again. I always look at the messenger, not just the message. And it seems not just deaf to an ethos of America where we listen and we embrace the stranger, that biblical mandate. But
well, is that something that you think the Time magazine was getting at with the crying child and the president?
I think that the visual has affected a lot of people. You know, my grandparents escaped the Holocaust, and I have their passports in my basement with the letter J and the name Israel by every man and Sarah by every female. My mom was a little baby, and her name isn't Sarah. But in case you eviscerated the J, they would know that you were a Jew. It's not that I'm comparing ICE or immigration by any means to Nazis, but the separation of parents from children is a sensitive issue. We celebrated Juneteenth the other day. We have a sense of impropriety with the Japanese internment camps. But getting back to the comment by this person running for Congress, it's insensitive and it's wrong. And I agree with you. This is not a partisan issue. We have a broken immigration system. We need to be a country with proper borders. Building a wall and concentrating on the southern border is also tone deaf because people are coming through the northern border. We have 12 million people without the authority in the United States. So all we've done is built a fortress if we don't onboard them into the system in some fashion. And it's not the right message on asylum law. It's something that you touched. Are we really going to turn our backs? Yes. If a person is in dire straits and they left Guatemala, El Salvador, they would go to Mexico and then they would be safe. There may be a beacon call because of the economics that are here, but these people are desperate. And what is the mandate for America when people are desperate and parents aren't criminals coming into the United States? They're parents that are trying to protect their kids. Well, our mandate is to open our doors and to give them a credible fear interview, make sure that they are vetted properly, that the standards of asylum are not made stronger, but are made proper, and then we invest in these folks.
Okay, John.
You know what? I hear you. First, I'd like to know the question that Grimm was asked, number one. Number two, I agree it is insensitive, but I think putting it into context, I think, is very important. I was born in the pink houses in Brooklyn, right? And NYCHA is a huge problem right now. And there's a lot of people looking at this situation in impoverished conditions, terrible conditions. And when they see that their own country is not looking after their own needs.
When somebody else outside.
Before we even get to that point, right? Money can be found for every other situation when people right here that are citizens in America are not getting what they need.
But they bring money.
And then secondly, for certain crimes that are committed, even not nonviolent crimes.
Yeah.
Parents are separated from their children. So there's a lot of situations
that agreed when it comes to criminals. There's a lot of situations. I
didn't cut you off. There's a lot of situations within our existing criminal justice system that needs to be addressed because principally they're exactly the same.
Yes.
So we're not actually having an honest conversation. Forget politics. I'll throw my big R out in a second. Right? And let's really talk about the issues.
I have no issue with that. And I don't mean to interrupt your R with my D. Quite honestly, I'm a former mayor in New Jersey, and I have great pride. No matter, and some of my closest friends are Republicans and their wives and so forth. Look, the truth is that I am concerned that we're not getting this right. The narrative is not just the words of chain migration and anchor babies.
Yes.
But it's also the notion that these immigrants are taking away from the challenges in Brooklyn that we have. No, these immigrants are actually contributing more than what they're taking. And if we invest when times are extraordinarily hard, these immigrants will become citizens, and they will employ and sponsor people for visas in the future.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from you.
I just want to say that irrespective of the politics, what has happened most recently has risen above the issue of immigration or not, that we're doing. Untrained people have children in cages, and there are questions as to whether some of them have been medicated, as to whether some of them have been abused. I mean, we're doing things as a nation that nationally no one, Republican, Democrat, would ever be.
A long time before Trump. We've had this.
You're talking about the cages now.
Wait, I'm talking about what's
happening now, and you're saying that this has been going on for a while.
Actually, the clips that the media has been using in terms of showing the fences and the caging and so forth, those were pictures from Obama's era.
Well, actually, I have heard some pushback on that issue, though, that
some of
those pictures were of the unaccompanied minors who are coming here, not children who are separated from their parents. And that has been a pushback about the pictures from the Obama administration. Not that there weren't problems.
But the comments the same, that the medical issues are...
I'm just saying we're inflicting medical harm on children and on families. And I think that's not a comment on whether our borders are secure enough or not secure enough. We're also saying that if you're going to be killed in your country because your mate will kill you or because the gang will kill you, still we'll keep you out. Just in Nazi Germany, right, we said, no, we don't want Jews
I think
here.
The gentleman's saying,
okay.
As soon as you cross the Mexican border,
yes,
that threat in your country is gone.
Right, except...
So we're not actually, we're using a lot of emotion.
Hold on, wait a second.
The
threat is gone. So if somebody is deported and they're sent back to a country where there was a threat against their life, you're saying that there's no problem anymore.
I'm addressing her point, what she was making. Let's say in Guatemala or Honduras, right?
Yes.
There's a threat based upon what you outlined.
Yes.
As soon as they cross the Mexican border, that threat in their home country no longer exists.
And I think the gentleman's making the point that the economic magnet, if I may,
is bringing more people here than letting them stay in Mexico.
But there is asylum law to protect that. I want you to understand that. If a person resettles in a third country, America asylum does not allow a person to get safe haven in America.
Necessarily, right.
So there are mechanisms within the law that's there. But the inflexibility of the Attorney General and the administration to even make it stricter and to then embolden CPB cops into becoming quasi-judges on the border is really a violation of due process. And one word on due process. Mm-hmm. The Constitution protects life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's actually the Declaration of Independence. You are entitled to due process if you're a person in America. Once they've made an entry, a legal entry, these are not illegal immigrants coming in. They've made a legal request for asylum when they came to the United States. They are entitled to due process. Due process, I would beg, is not putting somebody in a cage, whatever president, whatever photos there are. We can do better. We must do better with this dialogue. And again...
Or these children that are here. Are we bringing mental health professionals in to help them?
In a biblical sense, I think also... As Abraham in the Bible ran to wash the feet after he was circumcised, this is an opportunity for us to see that the next thing will be invented in America. We have a lot of land, we have a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of work that has to get done. I still think that we should be building stronger, a better, more robust entrepreneurial visas that will then help bolster.
Doesn't that get back to what John was saying about what Congress needs to do, though? And that's something, again, Congress
need to do something.
moves slowly, though, and that's a problem.
Quoting scripture, 1 Timothy 5 and I believe 8 also says that a person that doesn't take care of their own and takes care of someone else better than their own is worse than an infidel.
Okay, gentlemen,
Right.
sorry, before we go too much further down the biblical road, can we all agree that there's a biblical quote to support pretty much anything?
Absolutely.
Let's just all agree on that much.
And so the viewers won't think that I'm some hard person that doesn't care. The reality of it is that we have 7 billion people in the world. We have approximately 325 million people in the U.S.
Okay.
There is no way that America can take care of everyone.
I don't think everybody's coming here.
What I'm saying is, and the numbers actually disprove some of the things that Mike said earlier in terms of when you look at, there's a huge drain on public goods and public resources. Let's look at our public school system, number one. And I'm not saying that we close our borders, but we have to have a legal structure, right, that works for our border and address the illegal immigration.
Okay, everyone, we are coming, unfortunately, to the end of our conversation, and there's clearly so much more that everyone wants to address. So I do want to make time for final thoughts from each one of you, and I'll start with you, Michael.
I have a book coming out in about a month's time, Safe Haven in America, Battles to Open the Golden Door. I believe fundamentally that immigration, our national ethos, is reflective of what our founding fathers wanted, and that it reflects itself in the numbers. The D's and the R's can play with the numbers, but they contribute exponentially more than what they take. There are scores of people in the tri-state area here that have fake Social Security numbers and tax identity numbers, and they're paying into the Treasury. We have to get this right, both from an economic and a moral sense. What we saw in the last week was unconscionable, and America with another stain. We could do better. We need to do better. This is not a Democrat, Republican. This is an American issue that we have to get our hands around.
That's an excellent point.
The United States has always had borders. I think we need to have borders, but I think we don't have to commit human rights abuses on children, or adults for that matter, in order to uphold borders. I think that primarily we have to be concerned with the mental health and the physical health of human beings. And there has been a sharp change in that path. We really are doing harm. I think we have to do no harm while we secure our borders.
And John, last word.
I'm glad the president stepped forward to correct this. As a person that deeply believes in the construct of family, it's important to keep families together. However, I do think that Congress needs to act and act swiftly, put politics aside, and make sure that we fix a broken immigration system that has been broken for decades, right? So that way we can be true to our Constitution and our Declaration. And we also need to make sure that we not only put something out there that's politically correct, but that's morally right.
I think that is,
and at the same time, secure
the border. I think that is something we can all agree on. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us on the panel. We will be, of course, following this story to see how it develops and hopefully to see some of those kids get reunited with their families ASAP. Thank you for watching this special edition of Metro Focus. I'm Jennifer.